I have always led that Brexiteers are obsessed with this fantasy United Kingdom, this fantasy Britain, especially of the past, that can never ever exist again, purely because no other country in the world would ever just accept us engaging once again in gunboat diplomacy, walking up to a country and just say, yeah, that's ours now. And then once we do that, essentially just dictating terms and just start stealing their resources and pretty much everything else from that country, left, right, and centre. This, of course, leads us back to that ancient, most wonderful time of empire, which Brexiteers fantasize about, and very often most of their bizarre policy opinions do stem from. For example, Britain was this great trading nation. That happened again in the Victorian era. That is again because of we controlled a large portion of the world's surface, and because we controlled that, we controlled a lot of those resources. And of course, today we see Boris Johnson maybe finally coming to the table of a possibility of a Brexit deal finally emerging. Now, I've said, when we see this full thing, I think it's going to be a massive climb down, because I've always said, don't listen to the UK government on this. Listen to the EU, because the UK government have said, oh, there's nothing happening. The deal is stalled. The EU are just being completely inflexible. But then the EU say, oh yeah, there's been movement on this. There's been further movement. They now no longer talk about a level playing field. The only stipulation that they are talking about, especially recently, is fish. Apparently that is still the sticking point. And as I've said before, no Prime Minister or anyone in their right mind would screw over an entire country's economy for just one single industry that is worth less than 1% of our GDP. And apparently, Boris has gone and said that he's willing to do some sort of deal with fish. We don't know what that is yet. We don't know if the EU are going to go for it. But, as we said a couple of weeks ago, prepare for the most eye-watering climb down you can possibly imagine. And it doesn't matter that this, quote, fulfills Brexit, because the Brexiteers will never be happy with this deal at all. They will find something in it to disagree with. So, let's get on with this. But before we do, please do remember to hit that like and share button. And of course, down below there's a link to my Patreon page, as well as a one-off donation link. And thank you very much for the people who do support me that way. So, this comes from The Independent, and the title is On COVID and Brexit, reality is catching up with Boris Johnson's fantasies and self-obsession. How fitting is it that once one of Downing Street's little media gimmicks that led to Boris Johnson's true character being so badly exposed? The gimmick: having two pre-recorded questions from members of the public to go ahead of the media at the Number 10 coronavirus briefing. The stated reason for the gimmick: the people's government lets the people ask the questions. The real reason: it undermines the media and encourages softer questions. When it went wrong on Saturday, the first public question was from someone called Laura about shielding, but her question was the revelation that she had lost two people close to her to COVID. What Johnson's answer revealed on policy, that he didn't know much about the shielding situation, and on human empathy, that he has absolutely none. It is that he doesn't listen, but he hears the bits that he wants to hear. It's the flip side of his communication strategy on the coronavirus and on Brexit, which consists of imagining the world as he wants it to be, and then describing it, always careful to mention the government's world-beating role in beating it, or if it's a bad news, finding someone else to blame. So we heard So he heard the word shielding and immediately thought boring detail needed to waffle for a few seconds and then handle to Vance or Whitley, so I can focus on what I'm going to say to the BBC Laura. When he passed the question to Chris Whitley, the chief medical officer, facing a tricky choice, Whitley, the human being, knew the Prime Minister's failure to say anything about the two dead people was to use the word Johnson used three days earlier to describe the cancellation of Christmas as inhumane. But in a government in which critics and troublemakers are viciously debriefed against bullied, sacked, or marched to the door at gunpoint, Whitley, the public official, knew what to say, and it's something risked embarrassing the PM, as many who were watching were already texting each other. Did Johnson really just slack someone off who said she just lost people to COVID? To his credit, Whitley went with a human reaction, whilst being careful to link to a policy message, and that was another more sincere than what the ministers trot out their thoughts and prayers, whether for a celebrity death or 100 more lost to COVID. One of the many complaints about Donald Trump was that he only was ever motivated by himself. That has become clear since the election, with neither the US Constitution nor the health of the American people allowed to get in the way of the one thing that interested him, whining about losing an election that he lost. You may remember the time in the Oval Office when he asked a woman about her son. She told him that her son had died. He moved on as if she didn't exist. At the time, a friend who works in the mental health texted me a single word: sociopathic. I looked it up whether she might be to see if she might be exaggerating. This is the first thing that Mr. Google offered me. A sociopath is a term used to describe someone who has antisocial personality disorder, or ASPD. People with ASPD can't understand others' feelings, and they often break rules or make impulsive decisions without feeling guilty for the harm they caused. That is Trump down to a T. Among the people who also asked Bit was it a necessary personality disorder? I look at it like that. A mental condition in which people are affected in a sense of their own importance, a deep need for excessive attention and admiration, troubled relationships, and a lack of empathy for others. Now it's Christmas, and when I did something called the Godcast last week with Alan Frost, the vicar in Burnley who featured on the BBC recently for his help to feed poor children, he told me that he thought I was too angry with the government, and that I had to understand Boris Johnson as a human being too. So I should try to, quote, be nice. So for the avoidance of doubt, I'm not saying Johnson is a narcissistic sociopath. I am, however, saying that he has always had an inflated sense of his own self-importance, that has long had a desperate need for admiration and attention, that we know more than is good for us about these troubled relationships, and I am definitely beginning to worry that he has zero empathy. Then, if we go back to the antisocial personality disorder, they often break rules and make impulsive decisions without feeling guilty for the harm they cause. Johnson is all about impulse, and whether it's in his public or private life, he does not do guilt. Whether it's child poverty at home, the impact of his broken manifesto commitment on overseas aid abroad, or the chaos he's inflicted on millions with his latest COVID vote faced on Saturday. On Saturday. I'm not remotely persuaded that he thinks too deeply about real people on the receiving end of his policy impulses. He thinks how he's being seen by his supporters, especially the rich ones who fund his campaigns. He thinks about how the media might report about him. He thinks about his political strength as Tory leader. And, if it is a real mess, he thinks about distractions to move the agenda to something else. And there was a lot of talk about Kent at Saturday's press conference as well, but no talk of Brexit, yet another media fail. And those seemingly never-ending queues of lorries as a Brexit won on lies and false promises was running into the buffers of reality. Was Johnson worrying about the lorry drivers stuck in their cabs, or the damage being done to supply chains and the impact on businesses and jobs? Was he hell? He was worrying about how it would all affect him. He had two big challenges in 2020. delivering the oven-ready Brexit deal and managing COVID. The personality traits needed to win the referendum and become Prime Minister are the exact opposite of what the country needs to get us through this chaos he has created. America has corrected its 2016 error. We, sadly, will have to live with ours for much longer. And that is absolutely 100% true. We are going to be living with these consequences for some time to come, and I really worry about next year, just how bad it's going to be. I've often said, you've really got to look at some things with hope, because you get more things done with hope than you really do with negativity. But in this case, it's really hard to at least try and see some sort of, hope in what's potentially going on. The only really hopeful thing is that a lot of people very quickly are going to really understand a lot about tariffs next year, a lot about the single market and how the customs union actually worked. And, as we've seen this week, a lot of people are understanding just how sovereign the other countries in the EU are, closing their borders to us. So, with that, as always, thanks for watching. Hope you have a very wonderful and very happy Christmas. And also remember, down below there are links to my Patreon page and one-off donation link. You know the routine. Remember to hit the like and share button on your way out. And as always, we'll see you all very soon.